The first act of Red Sparrow was quite engaging, director Francis Lawrence doing a fantastic job of visually connecting the story's two lead characters, one from the east and one from the west. The stellar craft on display in the opening sequence alone had me smiling. The cinematography impressively controlled and composed, and the editing very intentional. The simple choices, for example, to place Jennifer Lawrence's Dominica on frame left and Joel Edgerton's Nate on frame right, all the while cutting back and forth between them amidst their daily routines, told me, without a word, that those characters may have been separated geographically and politically, but they were certainly connected ideologically. They were both driven by a similar sense of love, duty, and passion. Furthermore, their specific placement within the frame just gave me this great sense of an inevitable collision. Though I didn't know it at the time, I just knew deep down, because of that placement and that movement, that they would one day meet. And again, particularly in the first act, Mr. Lawrence was constantly impressing me with his visual choices, be it the striking use of red to signify both passion and violence, or the shafts of light and smoke to signify entrapment and fear. And moving out of the first act, I found nearly every scene between Ms. Lawrence and Mr. Edgerton to be, at least to some extent, engaging and interesting. And in the handful of scenes that those two actors did share together, they often succeeded in capturing that. I could see glimmers of the tenderness, simplicity, and vulnerability that those two and the director were going for. Unfortunately, those moments really were confined to glimmers, as well as many of the other positive elements on this film. One of the primary challenges that Red Sparrow had, even with this lengthy 2-hour and 20-minute runtime, was believably taking Jennifer Lawrence's Dominica, who started out the film quite literally as a ballerina, and turn her into a fierce, hyper-intelligent manipulator, able to remain one step ahead of an intelligence agency that had been in operation for decades. And even while the writer and director did do their best to posit that she'd always had a bit of that ferocity and that intelligence within her, the constant, ooh, is she in way over ahead and just about to fail at every turn? Or is she actually one step ahead of us, the audience, and two of the most powerful nations on the planet? Well, that just got a bit uninteresting and tiresome after a while. It also didn't help that the Sparrow program into which Dominica was placed was just incredibly boring, and the filmmakers only really played one note during that section of the film to engage the audience, which I think ended up being far more off-putting than they intended it to be. That being that the men and women in that program were seemingly solely trained to use their bodies as weapons to manipulate, coerce, and dominate their enemies. Sure, we were briefly shown them learning how to pick locks and trace fingerprints, which were really just written in to advance the plot later in the film, but in the end, their training remained unrealistically limited and unfortunately dull. Ultimately, however, the primary issue that I had with Red Sparrow was its inability to present evil in a way that felt appropriately off-putting and repulsive. It's a line that other filmmakers like David Fincher have also attempted to walk, especially with his film The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, a film filled with evil, vile acts and evil, vile characters. But when the visual style and tone of a film like that, or Francis Lawrence's Red Sparrow, is so slick, so polished, and so aesthetically attractive, the abhorrent actions of the characters cease to feel abhorrent. I, a handful of times, could see what this film wanted to be and the specific pieces that it moved in place to be that. The web of characters and cross-cutting plot lines declared its desire to be this brainy spy flick, and the relational dynamic between Dominica and her mother and Dominica and Nate clearly stated its desire to also have this really empathetic heart at its core. And though screenwriter Justin Haythe did his best arranging the web of narrative threads found in the original novel, and Lawrence and Edgerton their best giving their characters' relationship as much truth and relatability as they could, this film ultimately fell short in both areas. The intelligence of the film really waned the longer that its runtime stretched, and its heart was continually undercut when it showed its characters constantly lying about something to one another and playing the other to gain what they desired. Ultimately, this was a film that attempted to show some of the best of humanity and some of the worst of humanity, but unfortunately never really knew how to differentiate those two sides. And for all these reasons, I will give the film a 2.5 out of 5. I would still love to know what you guys thought of the film, though, so definitely comment below and let me know. And also, please do subscribe. I'm going to continue to review films and television on this channel, and I would love for you to stay up to date on all of those things. But for now, I'm Chris Hartwell. This is The Heartbeat. Thank you for joining me.